Welcome, everyone, to the regular meeting of the Minneapolis Planning Commission. My name is Chris Meyer, and I'm the chair of the commission. At this time, I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Baxley.
Here.
Campbell.
Here.
Chowdhury is absent. Conley is absent. Gordon.
Here.
Jones is absent. Meyer.
Here.
Shefty.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
And Chowdhury.
Here.
We have 8 members present.
Let the record show we have a quorum. First, we'll move to the minutes of February 10th, 2025. Is there a motion to adopt those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any discussion about the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The minutes are adopted. Next, we will organize the agenda. Staff is recommending that items 5 and 7 be discussed, and that items 4 and 6 be on consent. Oh, and 8 as well on sorry, I get that wrong. Yeah, that 8 be on consent. So if you are, I'm going to read through the items that were recommended for consent. If you are here to speak against the staff recommendation, please raise your hand when I call for it. So first, looking at item number 4, the zoning code text amendment. Was anyone here to speak against the staff recommendation on item number 4? Not seeing anyone. So that will be on consent. Item 5 will be discussed. Item 6, 2318 Logan Avenue North in Ward 5. Was anyone here to speak against the staff recommendation for item number 6? Not seeing anyone, so that'll be on consent. And item 7 will be discussed. And item 8, 819, 825 2nd Avenue South, Ward 7. Was anyone here to speak against the staff recommendation for item number 8? All right, so just to review, item 4 will be on consent, 5 discussed, 6 consent, 7 discussed, 8 consent. Is there a motion to adopt that agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That agenda is adopted. So we'll move to the consent agenda adoption. I'll open the public hearing for the consent agenda. If anyone would like to speak to it, they can now, and to any of the items that were on the consent agenda. Anyone? All right, not seeing anyone, so I will close the public hearing on the consent agenda. Commissioners, are there any questions or discussion about any of the consent items? All right, is there a motion to adopt the consent items?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstentions? Those are adopted. So if you were here for items 4, 6, or 8, your projects are approved. Good luck with your projects. Now we'll turn to item number 5, 63 St. Anthony Parkway in Ward 1, and staff is Alex Kohlhaas.
Thank you, Chair Meyer, members of the Commission. Before you today is a proposal for establishing an outdoor parking and storage area intended for large commercial vehicles, specifically in this case school buses and semi-trailers without cabs. This is for the property at 63 St. Anthony Parkway. There are a number of required land use applications, including a conditional use permit for a vehicle fleet-oriented services use, 4 variances, which I'll go through in more detail later in my presentation, and site plan review. So zoning map for the area, subject property is at the corner of Marshall Street and St. Anthony Parkway. This property and many in this neighborhood are in the PR2 production and processing zoning district. You can see that gray area to the east. That is a transportation zoning district in this area as well. This shows basically the existing conditions of the property. This is from Hennepin County. The principal structure is a warehouse building with the entrance facing the parkway to the south. There are existing parking and loading and circulation areas on all sides of the building. On the west and north sides, I'll call out, as you can see, in this view, the recent use of the property includes semi-trailer storage, but this appears to be relatively informal and not in compliance with current zoning standards for outdoor parking and storage. I'll also just call out, again, St. Anthony Parkway on the south side of the property. It is part of the Grand Rounds. There is the bike path on the south side of the parkway. There's a standard city sidewalk on the north side, but there's no city sidewalk on this side of Marshall Street. Here's part of the proposed site plan showing that the establishment and expansion of this large vehicle parking and storage areas on the west side of the property, plus some other improvements like a stormwater retention pond they would be installing. The applicants have described the intended use of these areas as specifically for school buses and semi-trailers without cabs. For zoning purposes, there is a distinction between those two things. For use purposes, parking school buses, that's the vehicle fleet-oriented services use that I mentioned, and it is also regulated the same as any other type of vehicle parking. For semi-trailers, when they're kept without cabs specifically, it's not regulated as parking, it's regulated as storage for zoning purposes. In terms of what's being proposed here, this would be basically grouped into two areas on this west side of the property. The northern portion would be used interchangeably for storing semi-trailers without cabs and for parking school buses. Because there would be no formal distinction, it's effectively regulated as both parking and storage for zoning purposes when we're looking at specific standards. In this case, this northern portion, it would be striped for 48 spaces, including stacked spaces. For the southern portion, closer to the parkway, the applicant is proposing to designate this as exclusively for storage of semi-trailers without cabs. Therefore, for zoning purposes, that southern area not regulated as parking. But as you can see on the site plan, they are still proposing to essentially stripe 34 semi-trailer spaces. Just a quick look at the landscaping plan. There is some existing fencing on the west side of the property. It's a 6-foot chain link fence with 2 feet of barbed wire on top of that. And they are proposing to extend that fence around the 3 sides of the southern area where a lot of that new pavement would be added. They are also proposing to add some canopy trees and shrub screening along the west, south, and east sides of this new paved area to provide that screening from public streets. Again, just to recap the required land use applications in this case, the conditional use permit for the vehicle fleet-oriented services use, the site plan review for that same use, and 4 variances. First, the zoning code does not allow location of off-street parking between a principal structure and the front or corner side lot lines. A variance to increase the maximum number of surface parking spaces from 100 spaces to 124. Variance to reduce the minimum drive aisle width for some of the proposed parking spaces, and a variance to reduce the minimum electric vehicle charging station requirement from 2 spaces to 0. As the commissioners know, there are a number of required legal findings that must be considered for different types of land use applications. This property is also partly in the shoreline overlay district, so there are some additional findings specific to that. I'm just going to focus on the findings. Staff finds would not be met, just in the interest of time for my presentation, but I'm happy to go into detail about anything else if any of the commissioners are interested. I will just note for the conditional use permit, staff finds all of those findings would be met, and we're recommending approval for that application, so I'm going to skip over that and go right to the variances, and again, I'll try and be brief on this. This is just a table showing which findings we see would and would not be met for each of these specific variances. So if you are considering granting any of these, I can bring this up so you see exactly what needs to be covered beyond what staff has found. Just to go through the ones we find would not be met and kind of all together. The subject is pretty typical for a large commercial or industrial or transportation property, similar to a lot of other ones like it in this area. For the purposes of that first finding, the the size of the property being as large as it is, we don't see that in itself creates a practical difficulty in complying with these requirements of the ordinance. And similarly, when it comes to the necessary scale of the use of the property, we don't find that satisfies this first finding regarding the sort of the unique circumstances that would create a practical difficulty or contribute to practical difficulty in complying with the ordinance. For the second finding, the spirit and intent of the ordinance for off-street parking and loading requirements generally is to advance the land use and transportation policies of the city, and that can be more specific when you're talking about specific standards. In case of the requirements that a zoning lot have no more than 100 off-street parking spaces, that's explicitly recognizing that excessive off-street parking for automobiles conflicts with a lot of the city's policies regarding transportation and land use and sustainability and design. For the drive aisle width requirement, the intent of the ordinance is to ensure adequate space for vehicle maneuvering on site and to prevent stacking or overflow of vehicles into the public right-of-way, including for large commercial vehicles and equipment. For the EV charging station variance, the intent is to gradually expand our EV charging infrastructure as development otherwise would occur, including charging for commercial and freight vehicles. For the third required finding regarding the essential character of the locality and potential for injury or detriment to persons or property, this, in staff's analysis of this, largely relates to the location of this property adjacent to the Grand Rounds, which, as you all know, is a significant active transportation component in our city. Right now, this property has a really large setback on that south side. It's over 50 feet. To the existing improvements, and this proposal would encroach a lot closer than that, to within 10 feet of that south lot line. And we're talking about large commercial vehicles in this active transportation corridor. So considering how much closer this would get to the parkway, that is what is factoring into staff's consideration for this third finding. Just to go through site plan review briefly, there are 4 requirements or 4 standards which would require alternative compliance. We do find that 3 of those should be granted is our recommendation. I can go through those in more detail if anyone would like. To focus on that 4th alternative compliance piece for the parking and loading, landscaping, and screening requirements, that is specific to the number of spaces which are located more than 50 feet from the center of an on-site deciduous tree. They're not proposing to provide any tree islands, and they're not proposing to landscape the corners of the parking area where parking would otherwise be unavailable, though they are providing landscaping and screening around the perimeter. And these standards obviously do relate to some of the variances that they are being requested as well. Even though this is intended for large vehicles and equipment like school buses and semi-trailers, as staff, we still find the importance and the feasibility of complying with these particular standards of the zoning code. And we do recommend denying this one request for alternative compliance for this set of standards. We do recommend approval of the site plan review application and have included a couple of conditions that would effectively address these specific site plan review standards. So just to wrap up my presentation, I just have a summary of the staff recommendations for each of these land use applications. I do also have a slide that lists the conditions of approval. I'm not going to read through these, obviously, but if anyone has any questions about these, I'm happy to talk about them in more detail. The applicant and their representative are in attendance during today's hearing. Staff received no public comments regarding this item. This concludes my presentation, but I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Alex. I have a few to start us off. So for the drive aisle, that's something that is applicable to both the parking and storage classification, is that right? Or
Chair Meyer, that particular requirement technically does not apply to the area that's being designated as storage. So it is still required because looking at the site plan, this northern area, which is regulated as both parking and storage because we're not making a designation, I think it's 27 of these spaces will not have access to a drive aisle. That is the entirety of this variance request, is those spaces in the northwest and not the southern portion.
Okay, so our existing requirements do not apply to storage, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the northern part is storage.
And parking, based on their proposed use of this. They would not be making a clear delineation between which spaces are used as parking or storage on
So
the
if they
northern portion.
If they did make a clear delineation, then would you recommend granting that?
If they made a clear delineation.
Yeah, so then the drive aisle width wouldn't apply if it was only for storage.
Hypothetically, if this was all designated as only for storage, including for semi-trailers without cabs, they would not need this variance to the drive aisle width.
Okay. And then I wanted to ask for more about the alternative compliance for two parts, for the pedestrian access and for the landscaping requirements. Particularly for the landscaping requirement. So the 775 shrubs are required, and there are 184 existing ones. They're proposing 162 for a total of 346. Can you say more about why you're recommending a substantially reduced amount for that?
Chair Meyer, largely because we are dealing with a property that is essentially not entirely developed. There's still a lot of open space, but it's not the same as a property that it's not an entirely new development on a property that has no use or buildings on it. There are a lot of existing conditions that we're dealing with. A lot of the property is already paved with parking, circulation, loading areas that does contribute to that total number of required trees and shrubs, but is not practical for adding as many as would be needed to satisfy those requirements. So based on the improvements that they are proposing, specifically landscaping and screening, sorry if I can find, around the area where they are doing work, they are complying with other site plan review standards regarding density of vegetation to provide that screening and having a canopy tree for every 25 feet of parking frontage, et cetera. They are complying with these other related standards that we have, even though they're still below the total requirement.
Okay, and then the pedestrian access one?
So that is required specifically because they are expanding this parking area in between the building and the street. The building is what it is. It has its principal entrance to the south. There is no direct pedestrian access in that area without walking over the driveway, essentially, or over the yard. But they're not proposing to make any changes to that area. Where they would be making changes and adding all this pavement, there is not a public sidewalk on the west side of the property, which is mostly where they're doing the work. So there isn't a logical place for them to add a sidewalk to, say, or a walkway to Marshall Street. Based on so what is there and what they're proposing, it is something that is technically not in compliance with that requirement, but we did find that it was a reasonable proposal based on those existing conditions.
Okay. Commissioners, Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you, Chair Meyer. Hi, I know this area very well, and if people know this area of the city, there's probably the largest stakeholder in this would be the park board. You were saying that it was a little hard for me to get out of the woods on this particular project proposal. There already are paved, or it's already being used sort of for storage, but it's not really paved, and so they're seeking to actually pave it. Is that where we are?
Chair Meyer, Commissioner Thompson, essentially correct. What I have on the screen here, this is taken from Hennepin County's aerial photography. I think this is 2024, maybe 2023. You can see there is some pavement, looks like blacktop on the north and west sides of the building, where they have been, parking or storing semi-trailers. I'm not sure whether or not cabs have been there at any point. I don't know the full history of this. I'm not sure exactly when the pavement was added, but we were not able to find any record of these types of land use applications, which would be required to lawfully establish this from a zoning standpoint. My understanding is that there is a lot of engineering that's being proposed right now for the stormwater retention component of this, so that also requires Public Works review and approval. So I think that's part of the reason why they are coming through the process today, in addition to the actual design changes they would be making to seek lawful establishment of this, for lack of a better term.
So I'm glad you brought that up. So, I have a few more questions, but two things based on what you just said. So they're technically adding more impervious surface to the ground. And
Correct.
then are they looking for stormwater capture as we're this close to the river, or is that part of the plan? That was something that I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, I would defer to the applicants on the engineering specifications, I guess, and that a lot of that is subject to Public Works review and approval.
But it is going to Public Works?
Yeah, they have
project
submitted
is?
an application for preliminary development review. It can't be approved without land use application approval. And again, the applicants might be able to speak more to the engineering details, but they are proposing a stormwater retention pond right on that west side of
Marshall?
all this new pavement. Yeah, it's kind of the darker hashed area to the left of the parking spaces, is my understanding, would largely be a retention pond.
Okay, good. Thank you. And then I just have two other questions. One was, I want just clarity around building with, it's currently 50 feet to, that's basically green space, and it's going to be reduced to 10? Is that correct? And that's being recommended? And on this picture, can you help me understand, it's being built to the west, is that correct?
Yeah, so what you see here, that the kind of blacktop pavement on the west side of the building, a lot of that would be, I believe, essentially replaced and expanded a bit along the edges to sort of modernize it, I guess, for lack of a better term. But they would also be adding a significant amount of pavement sort of in that southwest corner, not all the way over to Marshall, but sort of filling in that corner.
Where the trees are right now that we can see?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, thank you. My last question, this is the Parkway, and now, I mean, obviously, these have been grandfathered in, those driveways, right? Now you need special variances that go before the board. Has there been any consideration how this would impact those kind of heavy truck traffic on the Parkway? Is that anywhere in the analysis?
That is something that we as staff have considered, again, recognizing that this is Grand Rounds, this is very significant, not just a transportation network, but that's part of it when it comes to large commercial vehicles near bicyclists, pedestrians, et cetera. For zoning purposes, we haven't done a thorough analysis in terms of how many vehicles we expect, per day or at different times of the day, or where exactly we expect those vehicles to be coming from or going to, et cetera. Again, there's some Public Works review that would go into some of that from an engineering standpoint, but when it comes to our analysis and recommendations for those variances, we're seeing the Parkway as part of the Grand Rounds, even though this does go through an established industrial neighborhood. We're still trying to limit some of those encroachments closer to the Parkway itself. Even though there are no formal minimum setback requirements for this property, it still, again, gets to kind of the essential character of the locality as the Parkway, as a transportation network.
Right. Yes, that's. I mean, as the Park Board Commissioner sitting on this body, that is my largest concern, because that stretch, you can see the little corner I'm staring at of Marshall, and all the way through into Northeast is the worst paved section, well, arguably the worst paved section of the Parkway as it stands, and we're looking to fix that. And then I just am concerned that this would bring even more heavy traffic to that area. So thank you so much for the questions. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Baxley, did you have your light on? Did you want to speak?
No, sorry.
Okay. All right, any other commissioners before we move on to the public hearing? All right, not seeing any. I'll give just the quick reminder that we do have a captioner who records the meeting. So as you're speaking, please speak clearly into the microphone for us. And we also, I want to note, we're going to lose that captioner at 6:30, and we've got another item to get to after this one, so we'll try to move swiftly. With that, I'll open the public hearing. Is the applicant here to speak to this? Come up and introduce yourselves. And you can proceed.
Go ahead. I'll let you start. My name is Rob Binder. I'm a landscape architect with Civil Site Group. We are the consultants that have put the plan together and put the documents together. Go ahead.
My name is, excuse me, Rick Burnton, co-chief manager of the investment group that owns the property.
Should I go?
Yes, proceed.
So I think our ask today is tough. We have a lot of staff recommendations for denial on a bunch of these variances. We'd like to change that and not have them be denied. I wanted to quickly go through each of them based on the staff report and the findings and some of our thoughts and our opinion, I guess, of what should be done on all of these. If that's good. So for the first one, B, the findings, they're critical of the distance of the new paved area to the existing walk, since the Grand Rounds Trail is right there. I think a couple of points here. If you look on our sheet C5.1 of our drawings, we show a section of that. And as the findings say, we are 8.7 feet from the property line, but we're more than 10 feet from the actual sidewalk, which is a standard 6-foot sidewalk. The trail, the bike trail actually is on the other side of the road. So we don't feel like we're affecting that very much. In addition to that, all up and down that area, you have other parking lots, other storage areas that are as close, if not closer, than what we're asking for here. We're also, I think, screening the area pretty heavily, and it is a storage area, not a parking lot, but we are screening it. So that's for the first one.
Here, let me make
Go
one.
ahead.
So we also own the property kitty corner on California Avenue that's adjacent to the subject property, which is on the park bike path along that side. So I know the neighborhood extremely well, from an aesthetic standpoint and the looks and the setbacks, the existing properties that are there. This is a heavy industrial area. Our current tenants that are utilizing this from a storage standpoint, large retail operation, they're looking for expansion of there's a significant need for this expansion within the city of Minneapolis. I get calls constantly from people looking for space available to park their trailers on a regular basis. So the bulk of this is going to be trailer storage utilization. We do have a bus company that currently uses a portion of the facility on the backside, but they're looking to expand also for their bus services throughout the Twin Cities and primarily the Minneapolis area. So from that standpoint, from a visual standpoint, it's going to be a significant upgrade from what's currently there today. And then also representing what other properties have, it'll be a significant improvement over what's there.
So for C variance, the findings are critical of the number of spaces of parking. We felt that the 100 space standard really is not applicable to large industrial sites. There's all sorts of different parking arrangements and parking models that are being used on all these different sites. This didn't seem very appropriate to us. Due to the size of the, so we felt that the 100 was not enough. We willed it down to 124 plus the storage. And again, we're screening this whole area on the west side and on the south side. On D, what's that?
The aisles.
Yeah. The aisles. The findings were critical of the layout of the stacked parking with no drive aisles provided, basically on that northwest side or that north side. We feel the stacked parking model in this case provides the greatest flexibility in storage and movement in the most efficient way, which we're always trying to be efficient, and also the least pavement. So what's critical about this area is that we have professional drivers that are moving these things about. This isn't someone off the street who gets to park back there or be back there. All these things are being moved in and out by professional drivers. And that model is what really is efficient about what we're doing here, and we think is the best way to go.
And quite frankly, it's a hazard when you have an aisle right in the middle of a truck parking area. So from our standpoint, it would be a hindrance as far as the trucks themselves, moving the semis back and forth.
So variance E, also, the findings were critical of not providing an EV facility at all. And really, my summary, and the owner can go on about this, he's not in the business of selling power to consumers or commercial vehicles. We don't believe we should have to provide this amenity to the employees that would be working there, for instance. And I think, in addition, and he'll go on a little bit about this, but as these facilities are needed for commercial trucking, they'll be provided. They'll be provided when they're ready. And
Quite frankly, they're not even close. I mean, there's no request out there today for having plugins for any storage units, and we have plugins for our buses on the backside of our facility because they need it. And so we supplied the electricity that they can plug in during the winter months, just from a heating standpoint, from a starting. But from an EV perspective, there's zero need in the trucking component right now today that we foresee, nor do we see one coming on in the next 5 to 7 years.
So, and finally, looking at the condition of the site plan approval, most of those are fine, and we have no problem trying to make those changes or those updates. The ones that are problematic are number 3 and number 4. Again, it's the corner lots, it's the adding extra trees that Alex talked about. Due to the nature of the stacked storage and parking model, it's just not viable to keep trees out there.
Not in the middle.
It's at least not in the middle. We're really proposing to maximize the perimeter trees and the screening, and think that should cover us for trees.
And quite frankly, it's going to be a huge improvement what's existing there. If you go up and down the block, most of it is just weeds that's growing, wild. Is the bulk of the landscaping that's done on that street. It's industrial space. It's used as such. We think we're going to make some very positive improvements to the landscaping component of it. We don't mind doing that. We think it's important to be a good citizen on that front. But to go extreme beyond what we're proposing just doesn't make any sense for that type of property.
And that's really all we had for sort of prepared remarks, but we would certainly take questions or any other discussion you wanted with us. We can answer some questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions for the applicant? Commissioner Thompson, do you have yours raised? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Meyer. Thank you for being here and giving a little more expansive on some of those variances that you've requested. Can I ask you, what is, I guess I'll put it this way, what is like a pain point around 100 parking spaces versus 124? You had said that you tried to whittle it down.
So
what is it exactly that is?
This is the lowest number that, from an economic standpoint, when we go in there and put all the infrastructure in and all the trees and everything else, from the revenue standpoint that we're able to generate from that, this is the minimum amount that that makes sense in doing this project. If we get, reduced down to that 100 level, it just doesn't make economic sense, and we would pass on doing it. And I think that'd be a big loss from, our current tenants that have a great need for it, along with improving the facility and, from an aesthetic standpoint, which is important from your perspective.
May I ask, your current tenants are the ones with the storage facility that they want that?
Yes.
What is to say that they would vacate that and then you would need something different for different tenants? Like, is that even in the realm of?
They're willing to
5?
sign a long-term lease once we get this
Okay.
approved. That's the intent of this. That location, the number of calls we get is for that truck parking. That's the huge need in the city of Minneapolis right now.
That makes sense. Can I also ask, what is again the pain point about the drive aisle width?
The what?
The drive aisle width, that's just like?
Yeah, I mean, that's just the way you park your trucks and semis. You can't have aisles where you have, trees and things in the middle of there. You got to be able to stack them very close together as you kind of move in and out. So from that standpoint, this is how you do it from a trucking perspective.
Right.
It's not like you have a retail component to this. It's much, much different. This
So-
is how you operate an industrial park.
So, forgive me for
Yeah.
interrupting you. You're building this essentially for this tenant?
No,
Or,
they're separate.
Okay.
Our current tenant that maintains the building is separate than our tenants that are for utilizing the storage.
and would they, I'm thinking of like old, like New York City parking lots where they just stack it up real tight. Would they be doing that kind of thing with the buses or the cabs? Or, sorry, not the cabs, the semi-trailers, like where if you needed one way in the back, you would be moving everything
Yeah, they gotta
around to
move
be able to
two
get
out.
it?
If it's three deep and they need that back one, typically they don't do it that way.
Right.
They just do, last in,
But that would be
first out.
that's the idea, is you're just shoving as many in there as you can.
They're storage them, and they'll come in, and so they rotate on a regular basis. So on a typical week, they'll be full, and then midweek, it'll be somewhat empty in there, and then by the end of the week, it's more full. So they come and grab them during the week and then replace them during the weekends. It's typical.
That makes sense. Thank you for answering my questions. I will acknowledge this is from a park standpoint, I mean, there's a field right across from your property.
Yep,
the
understand
kitty
that.
corner in there, that we as the park board are thinking of plans for that would activate that space in a much larger way. And at the same time, I know if you just drive about 60 feet down the road, you have like 100 rows of railroad track.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
mean,
right there, so it's
You've
an
got
interesting.
Triangle Trucking right
place.
behind us.
Yeah.
You've got Triangle next door, then you've got our Versaire right next to them. There's trucks going in and out of there on a regular basis. So, I mean, it's a heavy industrial use area.
Yes. Thank you. Those are all the questions I have for now. I don't know if other people do.
Commissioner Campbell?
President Meyer, thank you so much. And I apologize to my fellow commissioners and those here today. I have to leave unexpectedly after my comments, and so I'm going a little out of turn. First, I just wanted to say thanks to Alex. I think your presentation in a really complicated issue helped break down really nicely for us, and I think I came in here not knowing a lot about it after reading the report, and your presentation helped that. So thanks for a great job there. And thank you both for being here today. I think I really appreciate people who are investing in the city and want to invest in the city. And I think everyone on the board here is here for that same purpose. I do think it's important for us to make clear that we are making quasi-judicial decisions here, and we're guided by the comprehensive plan, city ordinances, and laws. And in order for us to agree to variances, there needs to be clear legal reasoning behind that. And I did not hear that in your comments today. I think what you went through in your variances saying things like, I don't think it should work like that, or that's not how this works in our industry. And unfortunately, we have to have findings to support variance requests that go against code. And based on the comments I've heard from you today, I'm not convinced that those exist. And so I just wanted to say that before I left. I'll allow my fellow commissioners to make comments or questions after I leave. I apologize. Thank you all.
From my understanding, the variances that we're asking for are primarily based for retail operations, and they don't always apply, as we were told, to the industrial market. So, for what that's worth.
Are there further questions? Commissioner Bexley?
A quick question for Alex, actually, and maybe for the.
Well, we can go to that after we're done with public
All right,
hearing.
sounds good.
Any more questions for the applicant?
Maybe I'll take advantage and do the, so is this, it seems we're trying to parse between storage versus parking, and parking brings in a whole level of scrutiny and criteria that storage does not. So how do you guys think about what this is? Is this a parking facility or a storage facility?
Storage for semi-trailers.
Okay,
The part, when you have it's a standalone storage structure that you come in with a semi
Right.
to move it around.
yeah,
I mean, they're just storing those items.
okay.
And I think part of the business is the buses, and that's the confusing part, is that we have to, this is that's a nice part of the extra part of the business of storage is that we can put these buses on here on a temporary daily basis. And I think that's the confusing part. That's the part that otherwise we could say, well, the whole thing's storage. But we wouldn't be obviously truthful because there are some buses in the back there.
And we plan, because there's a huge need from the busing companies saying that they have nowhere to park their, school buses.
Yeah.
These are all school buses that we're working with, so that's what we accommodate.
But there's no cars or other trucks or anything else really back there at all, just the buses and the boxes.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Wagner? Or we still got one more for you.
Thank you, Chair Meyer. One more question for you. Thank you very much. Just a question in regards to who parks in the front of the building. I see in the satellite image that was provided a row of cars, and why you don't feel
The employees of the current tenant within there, which is event sales.
And in regards to the variance request for the no electric chargers, why would you feel that 2 electric chargers wouldn't make sense in that row of cars?
It's never been, we've asked, they've never requested one, they said they wouldn't need it. According to, we've got it in other buildings that we have, where it's been requested, we put them in.
Thank you, Chair Meyer.
Any further questions? Commissioner Thompson?
Sorry, really quickly. Can I understand the electric vehicle charging stations? What is the infrastructural, if you're looking at it, I'm just suddenly like as a big parking lot, right? Is there a lot of infrastructure that you'd have to put in to be able to establish those, or would it be like running
You'd have to run
an
the
outlet?
electrical lines out to that area and then build the boxes that go into it.
So you'd have to have significant electrical
Yeah.
work done?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That was my question.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Anyone else? All right, not seeing any, I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, are there comments or any motion on the table? I guess I'll start us off then, where I'm at on this. So I previously represented this area on the park board and agree with Commissioner Thompson. That's the park board has the most at stake on this, and there are efforts to activate that area more. And I definitely strongly agree with the comments that staff wrote, in particular on their rejection of variance B about the negative effect that it would have, in particular granting that one to the pleasantness of the parkway. So I'm definitely going to support the staff recommendation on item B, as well as item C. For item D, as far as the minimum drive-all width, that one I'd be open to an argument on it, but I don't feel strongly enough to go against the staff recommendation on it. For item E, regarding the electric vehicles charging, I think you should do that. It's just 2 spots. I don't think that's very burdensome. I support the conditions that were required in the site plan review. I am a little skeptical of the alternative compliance. It seems like a pretty substantial reduction in the amount of shrubs that are needed. I mean, it is maybe somewhat of an improvement over what's there in the status quo, but it seems like our default requirement would be quite a lot higher. But I think where I'm at is I would probably just go with the staff recommendation and not get too far into the alternative compliance unless any other commissioners want to go there. So those are my thoughts. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Thompson.
I have a lot of thoughts on this one because it's actually right by my house. I live on the other side of the river. I appreciate Chair Meyer talking about understanding the parkway situation, and I know he knows that probably as intimately as I do. I also feel for the applicant because this is a really challenging space in our city that's like, I don't want to say it's changing over. It's still very much industrial, and yet we're trying to integrate different things. And of course, you probably know on the other side of the railroad tracks is, of course, the Columbia It's Columbia Golf Course, right? I would be open to, what am I trying to say? Agreeing with Chair Meyer on the drive aisle width. If there was something that we could sort of give back to the applicant, that would make it less challenging to create this, I would be open to that. I'm not the world's best expert on the staff recommendation and how we make the motions against or with that, but I would sign on to that idea. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Baxley.
Yeah, I thank you, Chair. I'm kind of on the same page on I guess I am, the drive aisle is related to whether this is storage or parking. The drive aisle seems silly if I'm going to store the way I need to store on the Pike. So I just wondered from Alex, is there any, because I can't find some alternative compliance there to reduce the width unless I call that storage area. And I don't know are we calling specific parts of the site storage, some specific parts of the site parking, or is it all one way, or is there some language here that we can justify something like that?
Chair Meyer, Commissioner Baxley, if I can bring up the site
please.
plan again. This particular distinction between parking and storage, this comes from the zoning code. I've been in conversation with the applicant and their representatives over a few months as we've approached this point, and they've done a really good job trying to work with the determinations that we're giving them, and this is based on the language in the zoning code that makes a somewhat clear distinction between parking for motor vehicles and storage of other equipment. And if you have something like a semi-trailer with a cab that's a motor vehicle with equipment, you can call that storage pretty easily. The applicants have been clear that the intent is for these to not have cabs as part of this component other than the maneuvering. So it's not a motor vehicle, so we need to classify it as storage. Now, there's a lot of nitpicky zoning code requirements in terms of what is the height of screening required for parking as opposed to storage. And again, we have, for the most part, in the northern area where they are proposing to more or less use it interchangeably, which I understand from an operational standpoint, we are holding them to the most extreme of the requirements between parking versus storage. And in the southern portion, they have said, they are willing to designate that as exclusively for storage. They would do so with signage on, in the area to make that clear that it is for semi-trailers only. But it is different needles that are trying to be thread here, that reasonable people can disagree about this, but this is the approach that we've taken as staff in trying to interpret and apply the zoning code language for a complicated proposal like this.
Well, I appreciate actually both parties being honest about the use. And so what is there a certain percentage of time, or like where's the line between storage and parking? Like if it's 30% occupied, they described how the use pattern goes, so I get a little picture of what's there, but.
Yeah, we have not made anything like a time-based distinction. It's purely, I think the way I've sort of presented it to them is if you want to be able to use it interchangeably, then we're going to regulate it as both. If you want to clearly designate it as one or the other, then we can work with you on that. And that has implications like the number of parking spaces that they are requesting. If they were proposing to use all of this interchangeably and make no distinctions that the southern area would be for storage, then it wouldn't be a variance request up to 124. It would be to 160 something. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but that is the type of thing that can be impacted by this this distinction. So again, where we've landed and where the applicant has landed in the proposal that they've wanted to bring forward, it is to designate that southern area as only for storage of semi-trailers without cabs and to use the northern portion interchangeably.
Thank you very much. I think given as presented and the report as written, Alex, is very clear. So I think unless that changes, I would be supporting staff recommendation.
Would you like to make a motion to that effect?
Sure, I'll make a motion to support staff findings.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so we've got that motion on the table to adopt the staff recommendation. Is there any further discussion about the motion? All right. Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Before we do the roll, I just wanted to check, Commissioner Shefty, did you have any? I thought I saw your,
Oh, I missed that. I apologize. Can you turn your mic on, please?
I only had one question with regard to the drive aisle width. Because if it's storing the cat or the trailer, how are they maneuvering it into that space? And does that drive aisle width need to assume the cab is able to do all of that?
Chair Meyer, Commissioner, they have provided, I don't know if I included it in my presentation, but they have other plan sheets they provided in addition to what I showed. Some of those plan sheets do show the maneuvering diagrams. It shows how they propose something like a school bus or a semi-truck would maneuver into and out of all of these spaces, or sort of the most difficult spaces, I guess. Again, the zoning code doesn't make a distinction between a parking space for a passenger vehicle as opposed to a parking space for a semi-truck and trailer or a school bus. So that minimum drive aisle width, it's the same regardless of what type of motor vehicle they're proposing to use that space for. And it is a requirement regardless of what type of vehicle that they provide that drive aisle. So that does relate to their other variances, like the maximum number of parking spaces, because if you don't provide the drive aisles, you can fit more spaces and so on. So that's where the staff analysis and recommendation comes from, is sort of tied to the other variances.
Apologies for missing you. You can lift this and or have your mic on, or if all that fails, just yell at me. All right.
Can I ask one question or just
Commissioner
make a
Thompson.
comment before we vote? Sorry to, I just want to clarify something, because I think you've said it twice, and I'm just, that there's no distinction in the zoning code of the difference between a motor, like a individual motorized vehicle and a semi-truck. Is that true?
Chair Meyer, Commissioner Thompson, for many of the zoning requirements that we're talking about, that is correct.
Okay.
In terms of minimum dimensions of a parking space, for example, or minimum drive aisle, there's no separate set of standards for a space that is intended for something like a semi-truck or a school bus. One exception is if someone is proposing what we call a loading space, like a loading dock to a building that is intended for something like a semi-truck or a smaller commercial vehicle. We do have different standards that say a loading space and a loading dock needs to be certain dimensions that are it's a different standard than a parking space for a vehicle. But with the requirements that are in play for this application, it's the same standard that applies for all these different vehicle types.
That is very interesting. Thank you. And that might need to be fixed someday. Thank you.
All right. So the motion on the table is to approve the staff recommendation. Is there any further comment? All right. Oh, Commissioner Wagner, do you have yours up?
Ready to
Okay.
vote.
Okay. Please call the roll.
apologies, multitasking. Commissioner Baxley.
Aye.
Campbell is absent, has left. Chowdhury.
Aye.
Emmerich. Whoa, Emmerich, where did that come from? Wow, apologies, folks. Wow, yes, Shefty, thank you.
Aye.
Olson is, wow, okay. I'm having a rough night, folks, I'm so sorry. This was the same one that I started with, right? Okay, all right, we've got Baxley, we've got Campbell, we've got Chowdhury, we've got Conley, Gordon. Aye, okay. Jones, Meyer,
Aye.
and Shefty, you already replied, aye. Thompson,
Aye.
and Wagner.
Aye.
Okay, let me do some quick math. Where did this go? 1, 2, 3, So we have 7 ayes and 0 nays. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. The motion is adopted. We'll now move on to item number 7, 1302 Douglas Avenue and 1716 Fremont Avenue South. Staff is Andrew Liska.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioners. Again, the item before you is at 1302 Douglas Avenue and 1716 Fremont Avenue. The proposal is a 2.5-story structure, residential, with 8 dwelling units. This request requires 4 applications. First, there's a conditional use permit to increase height in the shoreland overlay, a variance to increase the maximum permitted floor area ratio, a variance to increase the maximum permitted height in the built form Interior 2 district, and site plan review. This property is UN2, urban neighborhood, and built form Interior 2. Combined, these 2 parcels are 13,500 square feet. They are located on the intersection of Douglas and Fremont, the northwestern side there. The existing platting of 1716 has that as a reverse corner. That's platted off of Fremont, whereas the southern parcel platted off of Douglas. In combining these parcels as a part of this project, that reverse corner lot would go away, and this would revert back to just the standard platting off of Douglas Avenue. The existing survey here, a few points. The red box on the top, if you can see that, that is an existing private alley right-of-way that provides access to adjacent properties. There is a curb cut off of Fremont associated with that. The green circle in the middle of that red rectangle there also demonstrates rough grade here. We're looking at a grade of 926 on the northern side there. Grade does increase a little bit more as you get further north, but just more of a general illustration on the grade here. If we look on the southern corner near the intersection of Fremont and Douglas, we see another green circle, 916. The red or the orange rectangle there shows that 917 grade. That would be approximately where we are measuring the grade of the new structure from, being that, again, the structure is platted off of Douglas. That's 10 feet in front of the structure towards that right-of-way. Last, there's an existing curb cut off of Douglas that serves a tuck-under garage associated with that southern structure. The applicant, again, is proposing an 8-unit structure here. The 15-foot easement alley will be maintained on the north side there. There are some retaining walls that are retaining natural grade both along Fremont and Douglas. A tuck-under garage is proposed, accessed off of Douglas, similar to that existing. And again, that red X would demonstrate, again, the grade point from where we're measuring height from in this application. Here are elevations of the proposed structure. Again, on the upper left, the Fremont Avenue. Again, highlighting on the right side of the structure, the height from existing grade to the midpoint of the structure is less than 35 feet. However, we are measuring grade from the grade point on Douglas, that oval on the left, which demonstrates 41.87 feet. The other Douglas side kind of demonstrates access to the lower level. We see on the Fremont side, again, some retaining walls that provide access to that entry as well. The proposed floor plans, there's parking in the lower level, both automobile and bicycle parking. The first floor has some amenity space, some multi-story units here, residential on first floor, second floor, and the half-story as well. Again, the applications and recommendations. I'll break down the height requests, being that those two are pretty tightly bound to one another. There's the conditional use permit to increase height in the shoreland. The shoreland limits principal height to 35 feet, and again, the height proposed is at 41.87 feet. Variance to increase height in the built form, interior 2, again, height limited to 35 feet. They're proposing the 41.87. Staff is able to make all of the necessary findings associated with these requests. There are different findings for conditional use permits compared to variances. Again, staff's able to make all of those findings and recommends approval of both of the height applications. Regarding the floor area ratio request, staff is not able to find a practical difficulty in complying with the ordinance. Staff finds that the scope of this request is not a reasonable use of this property. Again, the variance going from 0.8 to a proposed 1.32. And with that, site plan review, due to the denial request of that FAR, a structure that would comply with that would be seen as a major change that would have to come back to the Planning Commission anyway. Here are some renderings. The applicant did provide a demonstration of the existing area along with some floor area ratios. This went to COW, I believe, last summer. Worth noting, I ran some of the assessor's information about lot size and structure coverage, and these FAR numbers do seem inflated to me. I didn't run all of the property shown here. I took three. I took the two lower ones on Fremont, as well as the middle one on Douglas. The 1316 Douglas has an FAR of 0.73. From what I can tell, again, based on assessor's information, this is kind of rough math here. The property 1768 Douglas has an FAR of 0.65. And then the 1716 Douglas has an FAR of 0.40. Worth noting, too, this assessor's information may include half stories. A lot of these existing structures in the area are 1 to 3 unit structures. And if this would be a 1 to 3, we would not include any half-story structure in that calculation. So, again, these numbers, the ones that I provided, may be even lower in actuality. And two, again, this did go to Planning Commission COW over the summer. The project that went to COW had an FAR of 1.37. The applicants were told that that project was too high. Based on the COW notes, commissioners seem to have noted that getting an FAR closer to 1 seemed more reasonable. And again, the application before you is basically that same that went to COW at 1.32. So I will be here for questions. The applicant is also present.
Thank you. Okay, so this was provided by the applicant, not by you, correct?
Yeah, these numbers are from the applicant at COW.
And you're saying that these numbers are wrong, and you read off some of them, but I have no idea which ones are which. So I'm particularly interested to know the ones that are immediately adjacent. So like and the ones on the upper end. So the ones to the east of it, for example. So 1.68. You're saying that those are not. Was that one of them that you said was not as high?
I didn't look at the ones east there.
Okay.
Those parcels are very small. Those are 3,500 square foot parcels. So, yeah, they probably do have an FAR that is high. I didn't run all these numbers.
Okay. And then, like for the neighborhood as a whole, what is the general FAR? Do you have any information on that?
No, and honestly, staff didn't really get in the weeds in looking at a neighborhood FAR, average. Being the simple reading of the variance request, practical difficulties have to exist with this site in complying with code. It's not a broad, neighborhood view. I mean, you could argue that this should be interior 3, this should be, is incorrectly, zoned. this isn't that application. We're looking at the FAR request for this parcel based on this existing zoning.
Okay. Other questions from commissioners? All right. Oh, Commissioner Thompson?
Can I just clarify, because I wasn't at that cow, I remember it coming up and it got bumped, and then I couldn't make the next meeting. But so this was essentially the same FAR that was presented there, told that it likely wouldn't cut the mustard, and then we have it here?
That is correct. Admittedly, I was not at that cow either. I was kind of handed this project from a colleague of mine. But again, those notes from that meeting do say that, yeah, that 1.37 was too high, and to get it down closer to 1. And I think that the project that went to Cal has really changed. It looks a lot better, in my estimation, than the project that went to Cal. I still think that, with that said, staff can't support an FAR from 0.8 to 1.32.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
And then one other question for me. So if we were to grant the FAR variance, then there wouldn't be any further issue with the site plan review. Is that correct?
That'd be correct.
Okay. All right. I'm going to make a comment so that can inform the applicant when they do their presentation. So I was at the committee of the whole, and you know, I brought up that I would be open to the variance if evidence could be provided around the FARs around the surrounding area. So maybe the applicant will say more to that. We have looked at adjacent properties to find practical difficulties before. You know, different properties in North Minneapolis. Like we looked at how the setbacks were on nearby properties and found that constituted a practical difficulty. So I do think that is relevant. All right. Any other questions? Not seeing any. All right. I'll open the public hearing, and we'll let the applicant go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Chair Meyer, Commissioners. My name is Tim Baylor. My address is 2305 River Point Circle in Minneapolis. I'm here before you. I'm characterized as a developer, but in this instance, I'm a homeowner. My wife and I purchased this property 41 years ago. We raised our 2 children here. My grandchildren lived in this building for a few years. Our office is currently in this building, and if approved, and if this project goes forward, we'll be moving back into the community. I will note that this project was presented to the Lowry Hill Association, and they unanimously approved the project, and I would like to think that you have a letter to that regard in your packet. It seems that the question is FAR, and I will refer to the code itself. With the current code, I could not build the property that's there now. The current code requests for an FAR of 0.8. Right now, one of our buildings that's currently there is a 0.96. The south building is 1.0. As you mentioned, Commissioner Meyer, directly adjacent to the east, right to the east on Fremont Avenue, we have 3 properties. Their FAR is 1.68, 1.56, and 1.63. So what we're proposing, while it's outside of the current code, that won't allow me to build the current building, is still in context with the continuity of the neighborhood and the community. With regard to that, I think Andrew mentioned that there's a road to an alleyway to the north. Well, that's technically my property, but it's an easement that I can't use. So the property is mitigated, lot size is mitigated by that. On the south side, the current building has a 15-foot setback. The ordinance requires a 20-foot setback. So we're actually moving the property 5 feet back away from Douglas Avenue. And if you're traveling down the avenue, you'd think that the property was smaller. The difference is, of course, what is currently now a courtyard between the 2 buildings will be connected. And if you're traveling down Fremont or Douglas Avenue, you would not be able to tell the difference. In fact, you'd think it was a smaller building. So I'm going to ask that you approve the application and approve the staff recommendation with the exception of the FAR and the site plan review at this point, and coincide with the neighborhood letter, which unanimously approves the project, and also reiterates that it's in compliance with the complex and the context and the size of the neighborhood. Nobody likes and loves this neighborhood more than we do. We've been there for 41 years. And so we're proud of the neighborhood. We're proud of our tenure in the neighborhood. And we want to see nothing but the property values increase and the neighborhood continue to be stabilized. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Commissioners, questions for the applicant? Not seeing any. Thank you.
I will ask if I could maybe come back for clarifying questions if there's other comments as well. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify to the item? Okay. Raise your hand, everyone who wants to. So 3 of you back there? Okay. 4 of you. You can just come up in order and tell us your name and address for the record, if you're comfortable. And you can each have 2 minutes.
Okay. Good evening. Commissioners, my name is Craig Wilson, and I am a licensed landscape architect and urban planner. My partner and I have lived in a duplex at 1768 Fremont, directly across the street from the proposed development for the past 21 years. Many of my neighbors, interior designers, food stylists, dental hygienists, nonprofit workers, artists, wildlife conservationists, teachers, and small business owners wanted to speak here but couldn't due to work constraints. Several are renters, and most of us have resided here for years, some decades. 60% of our neighborhood's residents are renters, and many are lower income individuals living in naturally occurring affordable housing within historic buildings. In fact, 20% live below the poverty line. We feel we have been very collaborative and reasonable on this project. We are acutely aware of the need for more housing in our region and support it. There are aspects of this project that we also support, and we appreciate the developer's efforts to refine the design as mentioned by staff. It's a huge improvement from where we started with the Committee of the Whole last summer. However, the fundamental issue remains this project is simply too large for the site. A 70% variance is excessive and would harm the fabric and character of our neighborhood, increasing the floor area ratio from 0.8 as seen in adjacent homes that I thought were mine. I just learned tonight that it's 0.65 from staff to 1.32, especially when built above a first floor parking garage. So that's the space above the garage. Douglas Avenue is a key pedestrian corridor linking downtown neighborhoods and the chain of lakes. A garage entrance on Douglas would contradict the city's stated goals for complete streets, and additional curb cuts for parking would further damage the urban fabric. These measures might have been acceptable if they addressed a genuine hardship and if the building fit the neighborhood scale, but neither is the case here. When the project was last before you at the Committee of the Whole, Commissioner Baxley suggested that the developer provide historical and scale context. Unfortunately, the developers have yet to provide elevations showing the proposed development scale relative to adjacent buildings on Douglas and Fremont. That would help explain a lot about the scale. Instead, we have only seen renderings that favor the developer's perspective. Basic transparency should be required by the Commission, yet it has not been achieved. We appreciate staff's recommendation to deny the variances and urge the Planning Commission to uphold that decision. We also request that you deny the variance for height. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello. My name is Howard Rubin, and I live with my wife at 1305 Mount Curve in a condominium. This would be just behind the proposed project. The problem with the proposed development is that it's simply too large for the site. My family chose this area for its historic homes built largely between 1900 and 1920. Even our condo, built in the 2000s, was designed to reflect the early 20th century, fitting in with the neighborhood's scale, materials, and character. I appreciate the diligence of city staff in recommending the denial of the FAR variance request, although I'm still concerned that they approved the height variance. I'm also troubled by significant concerns throughout the approval process. Both City Council member Katie Cashman and the Lowry Hill Neighborhood Association issued letters of support before the most immediately impacted neighbors were even informed of this troubling project by the city. Both have since confirmed that they had only heard from the developer before endorsing the project. Additionally, since a Lowry Hill board member is the wife of the developer, questions still remain about whether there was even a quorum present at that meeting. This isn't how the process should work. A fair and transparent discussion requires input from the developer, the residents, and planning staff, and that didn't happen until much later. The immediate neighbors, more than 24 of us, stand with planning staff in opposing the FAR variance. Councilmember Cashman has since apologized and agreed to recuse herself from further interference in the process. This is an unfortunate situation, and I hope we can take lessons from it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon or evening. My name is Sarah Richter, and I live at 1303 Mount Curve Avenue. Howard is a neighbor to our left. My husband and I live at 1303 with our 3 adult children at times and our lovely lab. I'm here because I'm concerned about a number of issues, 4 to be exact. First, the extreme scale and the request for the 70% increase in variance is beyond the standard floor area ratio to our neighborhood. Fact stated. 2, the orientation of the garage facing Douglas. I walk the dog daily on Douglas, as do many people. It's a major thoroughfare. Again, I'm sure you're all aware of that, to the parks and to Lake of the Owls. 3, the height, which is maybe most concerning, approximately 7 feet higher than the permitted zoning ordinance. We are troubled by the lack of resident engagement in this whole process. As been stated by Howard and by Craig, none of us knew about these meetings and what was going on. I live right next door to the property. This is the first time I have met the Baylors when I walked in at 6 o'clock tonight, 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, whatever time we got here. But anyway, we had no community. We didn't hear about any of these meetings going on. And as was stated, we heard about it after the fact from our council member. When our home was constructed, the new homes right behind the Baylor property, is that it? I'm done?
You can continue.
Cut off? Okay. Our home was constructed, our developer faced the same strict limitations of size and scale that we're talking about today, so there's no justification in our mind for exception here. In short, we're disappointed, right? And I guess today when I was out walking, I looked at the property and I thought, why is there a brand new sign for rent, that apartments that are for rent on this site? And we're debating all this. I'm going to leave it at that because my time is up, but thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Oh.
Hello, my name is Susan Lowry. I've lived in my duplex at 1308 Douglas Avenue, immediately west of the proposed development, since October of 1981. At the time, my husband and I chose the Lowry Hill neighborhood because of its charming atmosphere, thanks in part to the historic housing architecture. While many things have changed since then, Lowry Hill still retains a strong sense of community and the character of a historic district. For the record, I strongly object to the scale and the design of the proposed Kenwood Boutique condominiums. As noted in the documents, the Baylors are longstanding members of our community. So am I. After raising their family next door, the Baylors moved to a new residence about 20 years ago. I stayed because I love my neighborhood. The Baylors purchased the houses next door in 1984, raised their family there, and have since rented the property as absentee landlords. I have watched the property decline over the years due to deferred maintenance, yet I have remained tolerant and strive to be a good neighbor. Despite this, I cherish the connections I've made in our neighborhood, which makes it all the more painful that the developer never approached me directly about a project that will drastically impact my quality of life after more than 40 years in my home. In fact, when we requested a meeting, it was declined. What does this mean for me? It means losing access to light and air on the east side of my house. As this massive development, 70% over the permitted size, will effectively cut off eastern light, even though the duplex I share with others complies with the floor area ratio limit of 0.8 for an interior 2 district. My house is 0.6 FAR. To clarify, we are against the height variance. If this project moves forward as proposed, the morning sunlight I enjoy between the two buildings will be eliminated, leaving me in perpetual shadow. This isn't just about comfort. It affects my health and my home's resale value, apparently driven by the developer's profit motive. I appreciate the Planning Commission's efforts to deny these variances and urge the developer and the community to engage in a more transparent and authentic process moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Would anyone else like to testify? All right. Go ahead. Tell us your name and address, and you have 2 minutes.
Sure. My name is Carly Godorf. I live at 1778 Emerson. It's just down the block, just 1 street away. I, like a lot of these people, just learned about this very recently. I was not privy to a lot of this information. I would like to point out very quickly that the increase from 0.8 to 1.32 is a 65% increase. That's a lot. That's a big portion, right? So like if you're considering the context of the neighborhood, how this changes precedent of like where to build things, what things look like in the future, that's a big difference. 65% is a huge increase. The height makes sense. Like having structures that are that tall, not great, but a 65% increase is quite a lot. Just pointing that out. I'm also against this structure as a concept. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else to testify? You already testified, right?
requested that I could come back for rebuttal.
I'm going to decline that unless there's a question from a commissioner. Would anyone else like to testify? All right, not seeing any, so I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, are there any discussion, motions? Commissioner Chowdhury.
Thank you, President Meyer. I have to go here in just a little bit. I did want to say, just in looking at the staff report on the FAR, I am in agreement with the conclusions there. The 65% increase just about seems like a major change from what is permitted, and I would not be supportive of that. And one thing that I find a little bit concerning here is the lack of transparency and connection to the neighbors in the area, and even knowing that this public hearing was happening until very recently. I know that our staff puts out a notice of different public hearing to community members. So I just wonder for the body to discuss, because I know I have to head out, if there is a cause or a willingness to potentially postpone the item so community members can be more engaged, postpone the public hearing, so more voices can be included in this process. It does feel like a significant change within the area. I also just am wondering if there are any findings of fact that could be discussed in terms of the height issue. I haven't personally decided one way or the other on that, and just getting the staff report and hearing from the applicant today. So I just wanted to make those comments before I had to head out.
All right. Thank you. And then I should have mentioned at the beginning, Commissioner Gordon also mentioned that he will be abstaining. So no one else can leave. All right. Other comments? Commissioner Shefty.
I did have a question about clarifying the FAR that was on the infographic that was speaking to the 3 houses that were 1.6 or more. If that was fact, that those 3 are already at that FAR, if that was confirmed. And again, I would love to hear from Mr. Baylor again, in terms of like the difference between the elevation from the front of the building to the back of the building, and how much that FAR is different, I guess. I guess I would want to also second what Ms. Chowdhury is saying, as well as tabling, so that we could have more intention on community input before making a decision. I would stand by that.
Andrew, so it was, you hadn't reviewed those 3, right? Was that correct?
Correct. We have looked at some assessors' information, but the numbers provided on this slide are certainly not confirmed to be accurate. If you'd like me to go through the assessor's information again, I can update you with more numbers. I guess too, with the grade on site, you mentioned the FAR on one side to the other. The structure is a basement, so that entire lower level is not included in any of these calculations as far as that FAR is concerned.
Okay. Did you still want to ask Mr. Baylor to? Okay, Mr. Baylor, did you catch that question from Commissioner Shefty from earlier? Can you repeat the question for him?
I just wanted you to offer another opportunity to speak to the FAR variance that we're talking about.
In what regard do you want to speak? The architect that did the design is here, Alex Hecker from AWH Design, but I would like to say that there have been allegations that we've done something nefarious and not talking to the community. We've abided by the city processes, and we've submitted this project to the Lowry Hill Association for them to put on the agenda, for them to present to the neighborhood. We've talked to Craig Wilson for several years. We've talked to our neighbor for a couple of years who wanted us to include her property in this project. The neighbors to the north, across the alley, their properties are 30 to 40 feet taller than ours, the proposed site. And so I wish we could have that context drawn so that you could see how this property actually fits into the neighborhood. But I will defer now to Alex to talk about how we determine the FAR.
Alex Heckery, WH Architects. We used Google Earth and the Hennepin County tax maps to determine site, lot area, and then use it's just a calculation on how you determine, what the FAR is. Are they all 100% accurate? Probably not, but they're with the information that we had, they should be pretty close. I'm curious as to why, there's something that seems to be, off by 50%. I would just have to rerun the numbers and see why it's so far off. But I wouldn't, I wouldn't think that they're that far off. I mean, we just used, site area and floor area and figured it out.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
The public testimony's closed, right? So it can't keep going on.
Over, yeah. Yes.
Okay.
That's correct. Commissioner Shefty, did you have any more questions?
So, may I?
Oh, do you have more to answer that question?
Well, I was just going to say that, we had professionals that calculated the FAR, and we have staff that doesn't know, who's not sure, but doesn't have any calculations to refer to. I'm questioning that.
Okay. Thank you. Good. Okay. I guess I'll share my thoughts on this.
Chair Meyer, if I may, since
Kimberly.
this seems to be
Yes.
a topic of much discussion, Andrew gave you some FAR calculations when he gave his presentation. I have some additional ones. If anyone is interested in those numbers, again, floor area ratios of surrounding buildings cannot be used as a practical difficulty for unique circumstances on a specific site. They may be relevant under finding number 3 about the character of the surrounding area, but for finding number 1, that would not be a relevant practical difficulty. So when we calculate floor area ratio as staff using the information available to us, we have a tool called Property Info, which includes assessor's data on the GFA of buildings per floor and total GFA. And then we can also go off the lot area that we have in our city records. So based on that information, I've been running numbers as I'm sitting here. Andrew gave you some. I have 1308 Douglas Avenue, which is to the west at 0.62. 1316 Douglas Avenue, again to the west at 0.73. 1322 Douglas Avenue at 0.41. 1315 Mount Curve, which is to the north at 0.37. 1325 Mount Curve to the north at 0.52. I ran 1218 Douglas, which is the middle building to the east. That's shown as 1.56 on the map. City records show that as 1.14. Again, those are 3 nearly identical structures on very small lots of 3,433 square feet. So not relevant or not comparable in terms of lot size, but those would be the largest in the area from what I can tell. And those are, again, 1.14.
Thank you. And sorry for missing you earlier. All right. Commissioner Shefty, did you have more? Okay. Let's see. Commissioner Thompson, did you have yours raised?
I did. Most of my questions were answered, but I just wanted to clarify the point. It was said, and I believe it, but that if staff recommendations of the approval of the height, but denial of the FAR would essentially mean that the project has to start over. I just want to clarify it in terms of as it feels like we might be voting soon.
That's
Discussing.
correct.
Yeah.
So we have some information in the zoning code under site plan review about what constitutes a major change versus a minor change. A substantial reduction in floor area ratio or floor area is considered a major change. So if the FAR variance were denied, it would require a substantial redesign, which in effect, would require a new site plan review application.
That makes sense. Thank you. I would also like to add my 2 cents to say that I don't think that we need to postpone this at all. I've heard from people since this summer when it came up at the cow, since it was proposed, and so a lot of people are waiting to get this right. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
And to that, I would agree. I think we should do our best to reach a decision in a timely manner. Commissioner Baxley?
Thank you, Chair. Just again, I think we had a really good discussion, I thought, last summer. I will compliment the applicant on advancing the design. But those guidelines, I think, while they were still asking for a variance, were pretty reasonable. And I think we're still at a wide margin from where we had asked that to be in the summer. So I'm going to vote with staff recommendations. Thank you.
One other thing that I brought up in the committee of the whole, and I believe now, is that the argument for a practical difficulty to 1.0 is on a lot sturdier ground based on the existing building. So I have a question for staff about that. If I wanted to propose approving an FAR of 1.0, they would still have to come back to get site plan review again, right? Do you have any recommendation about that, like in terms of the motion that would be needed? Kimberly?
So Chair Meyer, thank you for the question. Choosing a different number other than what's proposed here in terms of floor area ratio is essentially a hypothetical approval for a building that we wouldn't even know what that would look like at this point, and the applicant hasn't considered. So I would not recommend an in lieu thereof when it comes to floor area ratio, because they, in either case, would need to come back through for a new site plan review application.
Okay. So I'll just make that comment for the applicant for future reference if they did want to come back, that I think the argument for 1.0 is very strong. I do think, hypothetically, I do think it would work as a practical difficulty around the surrounding buildings, but I haven't been sold on it yet. So I do disagree with staff on that based on our previous actions looking at previous nearby sites and congruence with that, and the neighborhood association talked about congruence, but I'm not sold on it at this time. So I would support the staff recommendation at this time. If they came back with a request for 1.0, I would support that. Commissioner Chowdhury.
Yeah, I wanted to just make the motion to support staff recommendation and move this forward.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? Commissioner Thompson?
May I just ask one more question, since we're all here, and I'm glad to the motion before us, but for the applicant, I'm curious if there was, I try to see from the side when things aren't going their way, like, is there a challenge to have brought it down or to bring it down that I'm just not seeing? If you'd want to put that on record, I'd be open to listening to that position. I'm gonna guess no. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
All right. Any other discussion to the motion? All right. Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Baxley?
Aye.
Campbell is absent. Chowdhury?
Aye.
Gordon?
Abstain.
All right, thank you. Shefty?
Nay.
Thompson?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Meyer?
Aye.
We have 5 ayes, 1 nay, and 1 abstention.
That is adopted. Next, we have nominations for our executive positions. And Commissioner Campbell notified me as he was leaving that he would not like to be in a leadership position. So someone else should step up to one of the roles. Would anyone like to make any nominations? Commissioner Wagner.
Clarifying, so I'm looking around, there's only so many of us here. And
We have to fill president, vice president, and secretary.
And we, I believe, established at a prior meeting in conjunction with Commissioner Conley that there are a number of people that are not eligible for these roles, correct?
The elected officials are not.
That's correct. And if we need to continue this item because we've been losing people, I mean, obviously I'll defer to you, Chair Meyer, on how you want to handle that piece. Essentially, people would continue in their current roles until we vote. So I don't know that there's a particular sense of urgency other than our bylaws tell us to do it in February, but.
Yeah, so we don't necessarily have to take nominations, is that what you're saying? Yeah.
I think we don't, because we've lost so many members, we could potentially continue the nominations a cycle if we needed to.
Chair Meyer, that this is not particularly, we like to do it towards the beginning of of the calendar year of the appointments, but I don't think it's anything particularly time sensitive. And since we're quickly losing quorum and a lot of people aren't here, that would totally be acceptable to postpone it a cycle.
Okay. All right. So we can go ahead and postpone that, reflect on what leadership positions you want to step up to. Our next Planning Commission meeting will be March 10th, and then we have Committee of the Whole this Thursday. Are there any updates from staff or commissioners?
Yes, at our last meeting, we heard a application for a sign on, I'm going to give you the wrong address because there are multiple addresses associated with the site, but the applicant was SDDI Signs in the North Loop. It was a CUP to increase sign height and a variance for a sign on a non-primary building wall. The variance was denied and has been appealed. So that will be going to the Biz Committee on March 4th.
Thank you.
And we will see you on Thursday for Committee of the Whole. We are meeting to discuss the annual report.
That was the JP Morgan sign, right?
Yes, correct.
All right, anything else? All right, we are adjourned.